Rob Reiner. A name synonymous with laughter, heart, and cinematic brilliance, the beloved director whose films shaped generations. From the witty charm of When Harry Met Sally, to the timeless adventure of The Princess Bride, Rob's legacy was etched into Hollywood history. But in December 2025, the world was stunned by news that would eclipse even the darkest of film plots. Rob Reiner and his wife Michele Singer Reiner were found murdered in their Brentwood, Los Angeles home. The news broke on December 14th, ripping through Hollywood and beyond with a brutality few could comprehend. The discovery was made by their daughter Romy Reiner, a moment no child should ever know. Within hours, their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested and charged with the killings. But what Romy revealed in the weeks that followed, her voice, her truth, shocked everyone. This is not just the story of a legendary filmmaker's tragic end. This is the story of family, fear, heartbreak, and the words that finally broke the silence. Long before tragedy ever entered the public conversation, Rob Reiner's private world was defined by family, by routine, loyalty, and a marriage that quietly endured outside the noise of Hollywood. While audiences knew him as a legendary director, actor, and cultural commentator, those closest to him knew a very different man, a devoted husband whose personal life was intentionally kept far from the spotlight. Rob Reiner married Michele Singer in 1989, at a moment when his professional life was already firmly established. By then, he was no longer just meathead from All in the Family, but a filmmaker responsible for some of the most emotionally resonant films of a generation. Yet despite his success, Reiner made a deliberate choice. His marriage would not be a Hollywood spectacle. Michele Singer Reiner was not a celebrity chasing attention. She came from a background rooted in intellect, philanthropy, and social responsibility. Over time, she became deeply involved in humanitarian and children's advocacy work, particularly around issues of early childhood development, education, and social justice. Their bond was not built on red carpets or headlines, but on shared values and a belief that family should come before fame. Friends of the couple often described their relationship as remarkably grounded. In an industry known for volatility, Rob and Michele's marriage stood out for its stability. They hosted dinners instead of parties, favored conversations over appearances, and created a home environment that emphasized emotional safety and openness for their children. Together, Rob and Michele raised their children with intentional distance from Hollywood excess. They were protective parents, careful about how much of the industry their children were exposed to, and equally careful about teaching empathy, responsibility, and accountability. Discipline, according to those familiar with the family, was rooted more in conversation than punishment. Despite Rob Reiner's outspoken political and social presence in public life, his role at home was notably different. He was described as a listener first, a father and husband who believed strongly in discussion, reflection, and emotional honesty. Michele, meanwhile, was often seen as the quiet center of the household, balancing Rob's public intensity with calm and structure. Their marriage was not without challenges. Like any long-term partnership, it faced pressures, careers, parenting, personal struggles within the family. But what distinguished Rob and Michele was their refusal to let conflict become spectacle. They handled difficulties privately, shielded their children from public scrutiny, and resisted the urge to explain themselves to the world. Over the decades, Rob would occasionally speak about Michele with understated admiration. He credited her with grounding him, with reminding him who he was outside of his work, and with helping him maintain perspective in an industry that often distorts reality. Michele, in turn, rarely spoke publicly about their marriage, choosing instead to let their longevity speak for itself. To those who knew them well, Rob and Michele Reiner were not a power couple. They were something quieter, and perhaps rarer in Hollywood, a partnership built on trust, shared purpose, and emotional resilience. And it was within this carefully constructed family life, this sense of safety and unity, that their children grew up. A life that, from the outside, appeared steady. A life that few could have imagined would ever become the subject of shock, speculation, and silence. Because what happened later did not begin with chaos. It began in a home that once believed it was protected from it. The afternoon of December 14, 2025, began like any other winter day in Brentwood. Calm streets, warm sunlight, and the usual hum of neighborhood life. But inside the sprawling Reiner residence, a tragedy unfolded that would shock the world. At around 3:30 p.m., emergency responders arrived at the home after a call for medical assistance. Within moments, the unimaginable became clear. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michele Singer Reiner, 70, had been found dead inside their home from multiple sharp force injuries. The news stunned Hollywood and the world. Rob Reiner was not only a legendary director and actor, but a cultural icon whose films had touched generations. From This Is Spinal Tap to When Harry Met Sally, from Stand By Me to A Few Good Men. His humor, his insight, and his storytelling had shaped popular culture, and suddenly the man who brought so much life to the screen had been taken in the most brutal of ways. Even those accustomed to tragedy in the news found it hard to comprehend. The combination of fame, family, and sheer violence made it feel like a nightmare scenario. The story was no longer just about a filmmaker, it was about a family destroyed in their own home. Within hours of the discovery, shocking developments emerged. Nick Reiner, the couple's 32-year-old son, was arrested in connection with the murders. Nick had a history of struggles, and authorities quickly identified him as the primary suspect. He was taken into custody near his usual residence, and court proceedings swiftly followed. 2 counts of first-degree murder were filed, and bail was denied. The possibility of life imprisonment without parole, or even the death penalty, loomed as the investigation intensified. For Hollywood, the narrative was almost too horrifying to process. A family known for its closeness, stability, and private devotion had been shattered from within. Industry colleagues and friends struggled to reconcile the image of Rob Reiner, the charismatic, brilliant filmmaker, with a shocking crime involving his own son. The media frenzy was immediate, with every development dissected and reported across news outlets. Even for seasoned reporters, the story carried an emotional weight that was almost unprecedented, a family tragedy intertwined with fame, legacy, and violence. Amid the chaos, the world turned its attention to the Reiner children. Among them, Romy Reiner, 28, emerged as a central figure in both grief and revelation. When Romy first arrived at her parents' home, she was confronted with the unimaginable. She discovered her father's body and quickly realized her mother had also been killed. In those horrifying moments, she did not merely call for help, she pointed investigators toward a family member she feared could be responsible. Reports indicate that Romy had long harbored concerns about her brother's behavior. Over the years, she had reportedly lived in fear of his violent outbursts, which had grown more frequent as he aged. This fear extended even to her insistence that he not live close to her, including in her parents' guesthouse. Shortly after the tragedy, Romy and her brother Jake released a joint statement expressing their heartbreak. In part, they said, "Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends." The statement was both touching and cryptic, a sorrowful appeal for privacy and compassion, reflecting the surreal nature of the loss. Yet, beneath the public words, a deeper and even more shocking story was emerging. Romy's early identification of her brother as a threat, combined with the family's history of fear and struggle, painted a picture of long-standing tension that had culminated in tragedy. For many, the most shocking aspect was not merely the murder itself, but the revelation that this horror had unfolded inside a household that appeared to the world as loving and normal. When the news of Rob and Michele Reiner's deaths broke, Hollywood's vibrant community of actors, directors, and writers paused. For decades, Rob had been more than a filmmaker. He was a mentor, a friend, and a bridge between generations of talent. Celebrities, colleagues, and even those who had never met him personally were united in disbelief and grief. Television shows, radio hosts, and social media platforms lit up with tributes. Late-night hosts reflected on his legendary films and his warmth behind the camera. A particularly poignant moment came when Saturday Night Live paid homage to Reiner, acknowledging his contributions not only as a performer in the early years of the show but also as a guiding influence in comedy and storytelling. Clips of his past work were interwoven with heartfelt statements from friends, creating a tapestry of admiration that underscored how deeply he was loved. Friends described him as someone who could bring levity into the heaviest of moments. Colleagues spoke of his generosity, of taking time to nurture young talent, mentoring aspiring filmmakers, and quietly championing causes he believed in. Michele, too, was remembered for her grace, intelligence, and tireless advocacy in humanitarian efforts. The couple had always presented themselves as private, understated figures, yet the public response revealed the immense impact of their lives. In every tribute, there was a common thread. Rob and Michele were not just celebrities, they were human beings who had touched lives profoundly, and their absence left an emotional vacuum that Hollywood and the world struggled to comprehend. As the story spread beyond Hollywood, the shock rippled across the globe. News outlets struggled to balance reporting the facts with respecting the family's grief, yet the horrifying nature of the incident drove relentless coverage. Headlines screamed of tragedy, suspicion, and family conflict. For the public, the violence of the deaths, combined with the involvement of their son, created an almost surreal narrative. People were captivated not only by the crime but by the human drama that had unfolded behind closed doors for years. This was a story of fame, family, and fear colliding in the most unimaginable way. Social media became a conduit for both mourning and speculation. Fans shared memories of Rob's films, screenshots of interviews, and personal reflections on how his work had inspired them. Meanwhile, others dissected every known detail about the family dynamics, struggling to reconcile the image of a loving household with the shocking allegations involving their son. Amid the media frenzy, one thing was clear. This tragedy had shattered not only a family but the public sense of security regarding celebrity life. It was a stark reminder that wealth, fame, and public adoration could not shield anyone from the unpredictability of human behavior. Even as journalists and commentators debated motives and circumstances, the emotional weight of the story remained at the forefront. The narrative was no longer just about a crime, it was about grief, shock, and the complexity of relationships that often remain hidden until catastrophe forces them into the open. For viewers, readers, and fans alike, the story demanded attention, not just to the details of the crime, but to the humanity behind it, a family whose outwardly perfect image masked fear, struggle, and ultimately heartbreak. As the investigation into the deaths of Rob and Michele Reiner continued, attention inevitably turned to their son, Nick Reiner, and the troubled path that had defined much of his adult life. Friends and family described Nick as someone who had long struggled with personal demons. Over the years, he had battled with mental health challenges and episodes of erratic behavior that increasingly caused concern within the family. While these struggles were known privately, they had never reached the level of public awareness, until now. In retrospect, those close to the Reiners began to piece together a narrative of escalating tension. They recalled instances of conflict that had once seemed contained within the household, patterns of behavior that had been managed quietly, and interventions that were made in hopes of steering him toward stability. Tragically, these efforts would be overshadowed by the events of that December day, leaving a family and a world asking how it had all gone so terribly wrong. For Romy and her brother Jake, the shock was compounded by the realization that the person they had known as their brother had become a source of fear. The duality of familial love and caution created a complex emotional landscape, one where grief intertwined with disbelief, sorrow, and lingering questions about what could have been done differently. In the days following the tragedy, Romy Reiner stepped forward publicly for the first time, releasing a statement alongside her brother Jake. The words, carefully chosen, conveyed both deep sorrow and a need to honor their parents' memory. Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends. The statement, while heartfelt, only hinted at the profound complexities that lay beneath the surface. Romy's own perspective revealed a painful reality. She had long lived in fear of her brother. Sources close to the family described a history of strained interactions and moments of tension that had been quietly managed over the years. For Romy, the loss was doubly devastating. Not only had she lost her beloved parents, but the tragedy had been brought about, allegedly, by someone she had loved and feared in equal measure. Her grief was compounded by the reality that the family home, once a sanctuary, had become the site of unimaginable violence. Even as she grieved, Romy's courage and composure shone through. By speaking publicly, she provided the world with a glimpse into her family's humanity, revealing the emotional weight carried by those who live in the shadow of both love and fear. Her words, raw and restrained, painted a picture of a daughter grappling with shock, sorrow, and the impossible task of reconciling tragedy with familial bonds. While Romy and Jake were the first to speak, the tragedy resonated through the wider family. Tracy Reiner, Rob's adopted daughter, shared her profound grief and shock, emphasizing the loss of two people who had been anchors in her life. She described Rob and Michele not only as parents but as pillars of stability, humor, and love. Friends and extended family rallied in support, attempting to provide comfort and structure amidst the chaos. The household, once filled with laughter, conversation, and familial routine, had been irrevocably altered. The psychological and emotional impact rippled outward, affecting every connection to the family, from close friends to professional collaborators, all grappling with the suddenness and brutality of the events. The public response mirrored this private grief. Fans, admirers, and colleagues shared memories of Rob's work and Michele's humanitarian efforts, often paired with expressions of sorrow and disbelief. The tragedy became a collective moment of mourning, a reminder of the fragility of life, even for those who seem larger than life to the world. For Romy, Jake, and Tracy, the loss was intensely personal. The public could see statements, photographs, and tribute videos, but the private pain, the empty spaces where parents once were, remained unseen, unspoken, and deeply raw. These chapters of grief would define not only the immediate aftermath but also the long journey toward healing, understanding, and the preservation of memory. Behind the public image of the Reiners as a loving, supportive family, there were layers of complexity that few fully understood. While Rob and Michele had built a life rooted in stability, creativity, and compassion, the family also faced challenges that tested their resilience. Nick Reiner, their eldest son, had struggled for years with personal demons, including mental health challenges and substance abuse. Friends and family recalled episodes of volatility and tension that had, over time, created an undercurrent of fear within the household. These struggles were often managed quietly, with the parents stepping in to intervene, hoping to prevent escalation and protect the well-being of everyone involved. For Romy, these dynamics created a sense of unease that she carried for much of her life. While her parents provided love and guidance, she had also witnessed moments when Nick's behavior was unpredictable and sometimes frightening. The contrast between public perception and private reality was stark. Outwardly, the Reiners were a model of familial warmth. Behind closed doors, there was tension, anxiety, and the shadow of unresolved struggles. This complex dynamic set the stage for a tragedy that would shock both the family and the world. It was a reminder that even in families defined by love and success, challenges can simmer beneath the surface, unnoticed until the unthinkable occurs. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, Romy's courage became a central focus of the narrative. She not only faced the emotional devastation of losing both parents, but also had to navigate the unimaginable reality that her brother may have been involved. According to multiple accounts, Romy may have warned authorities about her brother's potential danger after discovering her parents' bodies. She was reportedly aware of the risks he posed, having experienced tension and fear around him for years. This revelation added a new layer of shock for the public. The tragedy had not only been sudden but also intertwined with long-standing family struggles that had gone largely unspoken. Romy's statements, careful yet raw, painted a picture of a daughter caught between grief, fear, and the weight of responsibility. By stepping forward, she humanized the horror, showing the world the emotional toll of navigating loss when it is compounded by complicated family history. Her voice became a window into the family's pain, offering both insight and heartbreak, and underscoring the reality that even love sometimes exists alongside fear. As investigators pieced together the events leading to the tragedy, the larger story began to emerge. What shocked many was not only the act itself but the culmination of years of struggle with mental health and addiction within the family. Patterns of fear, anxiety, and intervention that had quietly defined the Reiners' domestic life suddenly took on new significance. The public was forced to confront a difficult truth: the Reiners' outwardly perfect life was shaped by both devotion and the shadow of struggle. For Romy and Jake, understanding this truth was part of the painful process of reckoning with loss. The tragedy had revealed the fragility that exists in every family, no matter how celebrated or admired, and the ways in which unresolved struggles can culminate in heartbreak. This chapter of the story underscored the tragic reality that grief is often compounded by history, and that family legacies are shaped not only by love and joy but also by unspoken fears and challenges. For Romy, speaking out and sharing her perspective was a crucial step in honoring her parents' memory while confronting the complex, painful truth of her family's reality. In the days following the tragedy, Hollywood came together to honor the lives of Rob and Michele Reiner. Friends and colleagues, who had worked alongside Rob for decades, shared heartfelt tributes that captured both his professional brilliance and his personal warmth. Comedians and actors who had known him long before fame spoke of Rob's generosity, wit, and guidance. Billy Crystal recalled the quiet mentorship and moments of levity that Rob brought to every set, noting that his presence could transform a stressful day into one of laughter and collaboration. Albert Brooks remembered him as a storyteller with both insight and compassion, someone who celebrated others' successes as eagerly as his own. Michele, though less publicly visible, was remembered as a guiding light in the couple's life. Friends and collaborators described her as intelligent, kind, and committed to causes that extended far beyond the limelight. Her efforts in advocacy and humanitarian work left lasting impressions on those fortunate enough to know her personally. Together, Rob and Michele were described as a team, partners in life, love, and creativity. Their loss resonated not only because of their accomplishments but because of the quiet, enduring influence they had on the people around them. Hollywood mourned not just the absence of two icons but the absence of the generosity, humor, and heart they brought into every interaction. The shock of the Reiners' deaths rippled far beyond the entertainment industry. Fans of Rob's work, spanning generations, struggled to reconcile the films they had cherished with the violent reality of his passing. Social media became a space for collective mourning, as individuals shared memories, clips, and personal reflections on how his films had influenced their lives. The tragedy also prompted conversations about family, mental health, and the hidden struggles that can exist behind even the most polished public images. People were reminded that fame and success do not shield families from pain, and that the challenges of human relationships often remain invisible until catastrophe strikes. News outlets provided continuous coverage, capturing both the public's fascination and the sorrow that accompanied it. Documentaries, tribute specials, and retrospectives on Rob's career were announced, emphasizing his cinematic legacy while acknowledging the profound loss of his life and his wife's. For many, the events highlighted not only the fragility of human life but the enduring power of art to connect, comfort, and inspire even in the wake of tragedy. In reflecting on this heartbreaking story, one truth becomes undeniable: the Reiners' lives were defined by both brilliance and vulnerability. Rob's films reminded audiences of the joy, humor, and complexity of life, while Michele's efforts exemplified compassion and civic responsibility. Yet the tragedy also revealed the fragility inherent in every family, no matter how seemingly perfect or accomplished. For Romy and Jake, the journey of grief is ongoing. Their public statements, quiet reflections, and acts of remembrance show a commitment to honoring their parents' memory while grappling with the enormity of their loss. The story of the Reiner family becomes a mirror for viewers, a reminder of how love, fear, and unresolved struggles can coexist within the same household. Ultimately, the lives of Rob and Michele Reiner endure in the work they left behind, the people they touched, and the lessons their story imparts. Fame may capture attention, but human fragility, grief, and resilience are what resonate most deeply. In remembering them, the world is reminded that even in tragedy, there is a legacy that endures, one of love, creativity, and the power of family to shape who we are. If this video moved you, gave you insight, or left you reflecting on the fragility of life and the power of family, make sure to hit that like button. Your support helps us bring more in-depth stories like this to life. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a revealing story about Hollywood legends, their lives, and the secrets behind the scenes. Every click helps us continue uncovering the truth, sharing the heartbreak, and honoring the legacies of those who've shaped our world. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the stories behind the headlines are always more than they seem.